In this video, we're going to work through a way to create liquid surface tension like we see in the Westworld title sequence. Essentially, we're going to go from this to this. Now you'll want to stay tuned to the end to get the full effect, including how to set up materials and how to render it out in Redshift. We're not going to be using any plugins. Everything we do here will come straight from Cinema 4D out of the box. If you want to follow along, I've included some project files in the description down below. Let's get to it. This is the project file I made for you, and again, you can download this in the description area below the video. And I'm using all content directly from Cinema 4D. This is the human that comes out of the models section under humans, under 3D people, so it's this guy right there. And I went ahead and created some models around him that mimic the what's going on in the Westworld title sequence. And we'll just jump out of the camera real quick so you can see what's going on. So we've got a couple cameras set up right here, and you can see the characters just being animated and positioned underneath a cube. So pretty simple. And what we're going to do today is we're going to use the Cinema 4D volume tools to add in that liquid highlight section like we see here. So the first thing we want to do is create a volume object. So we're going to create a volume builder. So that's under volume builder. And in that volume builder, we're going to add in both our liquid as well as our character. And so these are being added together right now, and it's doing it in a way that is really not getting us the resolution that we want so far. So let's check out the settings in the volume builder. Right now the voxel size, so voxel is a three-dimensional pixel. The voxel size is 10. Let's see what happens when we make it 5. Okay, so the smaller this gets, the more resolution we're seeing. So let's take it down to 1. And so now we're seeing a little bit more detail, but this is not a renderable object, right? So if I try to do a screen render right now, it's actually going to give me absolutely nothing. And so we're going to have to figure out how to make this render in a little bit here. The second thing I want to do now is I want to double check what's going on. So we're using the union mode, when you've got union, subtraction, and intersect, to add these models together. And if I just scrub through the playhead a little bit, as these are overlapping, I just want to show you what these things do, right? So if I change this from subtract, we're going to get the character being subtracted from the liquid box. And if I change it from intersection, you probably can guess what we're going to see is the only thing that's going to show up is where these things intersect. And so we're going to use these options to our advantage. The next thing I want to do is to create a second box, right? So I'm using this box called liquid. I want to create a second box, and we're going to call that one subtract. So I'm simply going to duplicate this one by control dragging up, and I'll put it above my character, and I'll label this as subtract. And then in my volume builder, you'll see subtract has also been added. You can drag things from the object browser into the volume builder as well, but making them a child I find just works a little bit easier. So I'm going to take this subtract box, and I'm actually going to change it to subtract in a moment. But while we're zoomed out here, let's do this. So what we're going to do is take this subtract box and remove it from the character. And we want to do that by just creating a little bit of a space. Right, so I'm just going to move only the subtract box up until I just get a tiny gap between them. So that should do us, right? So I'm creating just this small gap between the two objects. And then as soon as I change this in my volume builder to be subtract, what you'll notice is now we're getting only this sort of raised section. And I think I'm going to have to move it back just a little more. This is too much. It's sticking out a little bit too much. So we're kind of creating this embossed feel. So I'm just going to nudge this back a tiny bit more until we're just seeing that effect. So it's just being raised out of the surface a little bit. And now I want to do a couple of things. I want to duplicate my character. I'm just going to hold down control and drag it down. So my character is now actually living in 2 places. So I've got him in the volume builder and I've got them separately, right? And because this was all animated in advance, everything's still animated at the same time. So you can see what's happening now is we're starting to get there, right? So there's a little bit of something raised up around the edges, but that's not going to create quite what we're looking for in terms of those highlights. We need to go a little bit further. And so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and add on our volume mesher so that this is going to be a mesh and not just a voxel, right? So let's do that. We're going to go volume and volume mesher. Then we're going to drag our volume builder inside the volume mesher, and this will create an actual mesh out of our volume. And so this is indeed a renderable object now. If I do a quick screen render, you're going to see that it is showing up. I don't have any lights in my scene yet or anything like that. Okay, from here, I want to just tighten up this volume builder a little bit, make it even smaller. I'm going to knock this down to 0.6. And that's going to increase the resolution, and it's going to pull this in a little bit. So if we zoom in, you can see that resolution is a lot tighter. But still, we're not getting, it's kind of clunky looking. So I'm going to go back into my volume builder, and we're going to add a smooth object. So we're actually going to add a smooth and a dilate, right? So if you look under this little, it looks like an iron, right? If you hold this down, you've got a few different options. There's dilate and erode, and then there's close and open. We're going to first do a dilate and erode. That's going to do that to everything underneath here, and you'll see what it's doing in a moment. So it's a kind of puffing everything up like a marshmallow. So it's doing too much. I'm going to change my offset down to something smaller, right? So it's at 5. 1 maybe is still too big. Let's do 0.5 and see how that looks. All right, and then let's do an additional object on here. Let's do maybe 50% of that dilate and erode, so it's not doing so much. And then let's go ahead and add a smooth on. So I just click the iron, that's going to add a smooth group on, and that's going to just smooth everything out a little bit. Right, so this is starting to look pretty good, right? We're getting this nice sort of soft embossed feeling. If you feel like it's smoothing too much, you can always turn it down to like 50% or something like that, and that's looking even better. So that's getting us pretty close. You can see that as I scrub through my timeline now, it's a little clunky, right? It's not going very fast anymore, but it is giving us a good idea for what this is looking like. Right, so I'm going to focus mostly on the arms up here. And what I want to do now is I want to create not just a ridge that goes up like this, but I want to create a little bit of a hump that goes down, and that's going to give us that nice wet highlight as the liquid touches the model. And so to get that effect, we're going to actually duplicate some of the things that are happening in here. The first thing I'm going to duplicate is my character. So I'm just going to control drag my character up in the volume mesher. And for now, we're just going to go ahead and hide our main character down here. Clicking these buttons is the same as clicking under basic for your object, using this viewport visibility and render visibility on or off. So you can click it here and you can see that it's changing below as well. So I'm just going to click both of those so that that character is completely hidden. And I put this in the wrong space. It needs to be right here, my volume builder. That's why we're getting a duplicate of my character. Oops. Okay, so here we go. We've got our volume builder, we've got our character, and instead of union right now, I'm going to change this one to subtract. So it's a little weird, but we're getting this subtraction of our character, but you can see we're starting to get this little lip built up on the outside here. And that is what I'm looking for. And the second thing I'm going to do is duplicate my liquid group, and I'll go ahead and add it up here as well. And that'll be a union. And once we do that, you'll see we're getting this little sort of flaky looking embossed component. Now back in my volume builder, on top of liquid, I'm going to add another smooth group. And that smooth group is going to really smooth things out. So I want to turn it down to something like 20% effectiveness or strength. And this is starting to get us really what we're looking for. So let me go ahead and turn our character back on. And now you can see we're getting this nice raised section around our character. And it's looking really good, right? So as our character is coming back down into this liquid, it's creating these raised areas around it. And I'll just jump forward in the timeline a few little spaces and we can see what that's looking like. So that's the first part.
For the next part, we're going to set up our materials and our lights and get things ready to render. In order to pull out that wet highlight, we're going to need a few different lights. The first light I'm going to create is just a dome light, and that's going to light our scene pretty evenly. And so I'm going to first set up my materials, and then I'll pop some lights in my scene. So let's look at some of the materials we've got available to us here. If we come down to materials, all of this first group is actually Redshift materials, and you can tell by selecting them, and they should show up with the Redshift logo in the left top corner. So I want to find a liquid material that I can use for the sort of submerged liquid in the background. And this honey material will work really well for us. So if it's not downloaded, just select the download button, and then we'll click and drag it over here to add it to our material browser. And I also want to find a metallic material, so I'm going to come in here to our metal section, and I'm just going to use this metal brushed material, and we'll put that on our metallic objects in the background. And I also want to create a new material that I'm going to use just for the character. So we can hide our content browser for a little bit. And let's make a new material. It'll be just a new material, so a Redshift material. And in that material channel, I'm going to create a color that's kind of gray, like a middle gray. And we'll go ahead and increase our reflection roughness just a tiny bit, maybe 0.3. And we'll throw that on our character. So let's open up this character group. I've got things separated out by the character itself down here, combined with the metallic components under this tube group. So I'll grab the metallic material and put it on our tube group. And I'll put the Redshift material that we just created on our character. And I'm going to add the honey to our volume mesher. And so you might have seen there were question marks on here. I had materials on here previously that I forgot to delete. So that's what that was about. And from here, let's just do a quick lighting setup, and then we'll adjust these materials to make them look the way that we want them to. So I'm going to tell my Redshift IPR to start up so that we can see what's going on right now. And I'll go ahead and stop looking through my camera. I'll look through my default camera. Like I mentioned before, we're going to add two different kind of lights. We're going to do a dome light, and then we're going to do an area light. Let's start off with that dome light. So the dome light's going to add a nice even sort of shading all around, but I don't want it to be completely white, so I do want to grab a material that I'm going to throw in this general texture channel. And so let's go find that. If we switch our content browser to all and type in HDRI, you'll see that Cinema has a bunch of HDR materials, HDR, high dynamic range images available for us to use. And I'm going to use this HDR Light Studio, and we'll just drag that in that channel. And it will now, if I rotate around my scene, you'll see that that lighting studio is actually in the background, and that is lighting up our character right now. But that's not all we need, right? That's just giving us some nice lighting. It looks pretty good, but it's not everything we need. So let's go ahead and create a area light. And we're going to drag that area light out. And I'm going to drag it up here. I'm going to make it a little bit wider and a little bit more narrow. I'll turn off our IPR for just a little bit so we can see the light generation. So I'm going to make it a little bit narrow, and I'm going to make it a little wide. Drag it up, rotate it, and I'm just going to move it out a little bit. See how that feels. And the first thing I want to do is test both camera views to make sure we're not getting any weird reflections. So you can see it is actually reflecting in my camera 1 view, but not in my camera 2 view. Of course, these are way too bright right now. So I'm just going to move that light up a little more, double check my camera 1, and now we're looking pretty good. So that'll be our main light that's casting the shadow, but it's really bright. I'm going to turn it down to about maybe 50 in intensity. I'm also going to turn the dome light down in intensity. 1 is where it's at right now, which is the same as 100 for this light, and I'm going to put it down to 0.5. And then I just want to double check and see if we're getting those highlights that we're looking for. And I can see them starting to happen, right? So we're getting that highlight on the edge. That's looking pretty nice. I think that's going to give us what we're looking for. We could test it out a little bit in different areas. Let's go forward in our timeline a little bit and see how it feels. So I'm not really getting it in all of the places that I'd like to get it. Let's go to 80, frame 80 here. So it's there, but it's not exactly perfect. So I think I want to add a little bit more light. So I'm going to add another area light. So I'm just going to duplicate this one by control dragging up and look in my default camera. This one I'm just going to pull down here more towards the middle and pull it back. Maybe up a little bit. I just want those highlights to show up, and I'll probably turn this one down to like 40%. Let's see how that feels. Now I think we probably need to make some changes to our material so that it's not so shiny. In our liquid honey material, let's make some changes here. So I'm going to just add a little bit of roughness. So I'll say 0.3. And that's going to help diffuse that reflection that was happening from the light a little bit. And I also want to maybe narrow that light, I feel like. Maybe make it a little smaller and more narrow. I think I also want to tone down the color of this to be more of a gray. And now let's change the color of our honey material. So the Westworld kind of title sequence that we're riffing off of is kind of green. So I'm going to pull all of these hues down to more of a green hue and really towards white, almost like a, I hate to say this, but like a moldy milk sort of feel. Like it's this sort of sickly green, greenish white. And we also want to change the subsurface scatter color to match that as well. So we'll get more into these greeny, orangey hues and pull that down. I'll make this first one really kind of white, and then I'll make the second one a little darker. So we've got that sort of milky look. And I think I might tone down the reflection roughness just a little bit. Try 0.2. And one other thing I want to try to do is I'm going to add a little bit more green back into those colors. But the first thing I think I'll do is actually change my main area light. And so this top area light, I want to change the color of that to be a little bit more towards the orangey yellow hue. And I think that's going to make a big difference in the way this feels. So now that light is transmitting through and it's giving us a lot more variability in there, and it's looking a lot nicer. And this second light that's out front, I'm going to go ahead and leave pretty white, but just slightly off. There's no such thing really as a perfectly white light, so I think that's looking great. From here, I think I'm going to, again, manipulate that color just a little bit more towards the green. I think that's looking pretty good. So we're getting some nice highlights. We're getting these nice light, studio light kind of look on the front, and we're getting these highlights along the bottom just like we were looking for. And all we have to do from this point is set up our render. So let's see, we're going to set up 1920 by 1080. For camera 2, I'm going to render from frame 45 to 120, and we'll set up as JPEGs. And I'll just go ahead and put this in a folder, and I'll make a new folder for this one. So we're saving out JPEGs, we're saving out JPEGs and consecutively numbered, and 1920 by 1080, frame 45 to 120. Good to go. We'll render these out and I'll show you the results. So here's what we wound up with. You can see the comparison before and after from no wet highlights to wet highlights. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.